Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50. Today's topic is 3 simple things. Michael, what do you got?
Yeah, it's just a bit of a nuts and bolts one. So going back to the global financial crisis, we know that the worst day that you could have picked to invest was Tuesday, the 9th of October 2007.
That was when the peak of
the market.
Just before the GFC, before the drop.
For the global financial crisis. So it was... we're recording this in October of 2021. So we're looking at 14 years ago, almost 14 years ago to the day.
Yep.
So if you'd done that, and let's assume for a moment you had saved $100,000.
Yep.
And you thought, I've got this in cash, and what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put that $100,000, I'm going to invest that fully. Yep. Into the great companies of Australia and the world, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add $10,000 a year,
yep.
which I've previously been saving, but I'm going to invest that money now.
Yep.
I had $100,000 in on the worst day in the last 14 years, 15 years.
So the reason you're calling this 3 simple things is because you're not saying you've picked the bottom of the market. No. It's simple because you've actually invested. You haven't tried to time. You've got it completely wrong.
Murphy's Law is I've got this completely wrong. It's the worst day.
And we've just touched on this in previous podcasts. This is people's biggest fear possible. Yep. Is what if I invest on the day, or what if I retire on the day that the GFC hits? What if I invest on the day that then there's another GFC? So this is the worst case.
I've been diligently saving. Yep. I've saved $10,000 a year, let's assume, for the previous 10 years. Yep. I've got that all in cash.
Yep.
I pull the trigger,
yep,
and add that $100,000 in on the worst possible day, Tuesday, October 9, 2007. The markets in Australia and the world are at their peak,
mm-hmm.
and I put that in there. However, what has actually happened since then? So the bad news, first of all, is that original $100,000 that I put in 18 months later,
yep.
after that date. In March of 2009, that sum of money had fallen to be worth roughly about $43,000.
Yep.
So I'm ruining that decision.
Yep. And this is the second simple thing is that you haven't reacted to that. You haven't reacted to investing your $10,000. You haven't done anything with that original sum of money, and you've just kept working the plan. And this is like the Forrest Gump equivalent of investing here, where you just kept running. You invested that money, you forgot about it, and then you just kept putting your $10,000 in every year.
Yeah, and we're looking at a broad-based mix of the best quality companies in Australia and around the world. So what's happened? What I've actually point to here? What I've actually averaged over the last 14 years as a rate of return from that sum of money.
Yeah.
Now, we know that the first 18 months was minus 57%, not counting dividends, just share price growth moving backwards. I've actually averaged over that longer term period of time, 14 years, including that dip of 57%, global financial crisis, I've actually averaged a 10% rate of return per annum, including dividends over that period of time. So what's happened over that period of time is that I've got that return. I've also then assumed that what we've done is this person's added 10% of that original amount, $10,000 a year, to their investment. So they've bought at all different prices.
Yep, and just kept tipping it in.
And just kept tipping that money in.
Yep.
They've indexed that to 3% because
as their wages have gone up,
where would they be in October 2021? Well, they'd actually have $706,000 over that time frame.
Yeah. So they invested $100,000, which immediately dropped to well, not immediately, but it could drop to 43,000 over the course of the next 18 months.
18 months, yep.
They invested 100,000 in those dollars. They're investing $10,000 a year in $2,007 for 14 years, which is effectively 140,000 in those terms.
Yep.
So they've invested in $2,007 $240,000, and that's now grown to just over $700,000.
Yeah, so just over $700,000, and again, bearing in mind, 3% indexation on the amount that they're putting in every year. So $10,000 in the first year, $10,300 in the second year, increased by 3%. $10,609 in the third year. This is what they're putting in.
Yep.
The rate of return is just a nice, neat average of 10% per year on that sum of money. If you averaged 10% as a rate of return, and that has been the average over that period of time, inclusive of the first period of time, which was at minus 57%. That $100,000 has turned into a bit over $700,000 over that period of time. Now, the third part is, what would a 10% return if it's assumed, and it is assumed, that you continue on and get that 10% rate of return? Because when we look back through history, that tends to be around the rate of return, not exactly all the time. So certainly we're not trying to predict this. We're saying historically it's tended to be 10%. So what does a 10% rate of return do for us now? If we said 14 years ago we're going to be retiring in 14 years, we've invested $100,000. Geez, we're ruining that decision. Because we've done that on the worst possible day. We've suffered a on paper loss, and this is the important thing. It's on paper, a 57% drop 18 months into that. But on average, over that 14 years, we've actually averaged rates of return of 10% as a rate of return. And we've added in $10,000 a year indexed to inflation. We now, like I said, have over $700,000. If we continue on, the third point is, if we continue on, if we got a 10% rate of return, that's a return of an extra $70,000 off that sum of money in the first year of our retirement, or in the next 12 months. So just a nice little simple one.
I love these sorts of ones, because it's sort of, we've touched on this before in recent podcasts about how there's always, you podcast about effective, moving the chains in a game of NFL. We always feel like there has to be some big play that you do, and this is an example of three very simple things. That's all you had to do was invest that lump sum of money. You had to keep adding to that lump sum of money. And then you just had to stay invested the whole way through and continue to stay invested the whole way through now. It almost feels too easy, and it's counterintuitive that that's all you have to do. If you look at most of the financial benefits that accrue to people throughout their life, it's due to good behaviours and it's due to good habits. And this is an example of that, where you kind of, it's a bit like the turtle and the hare sort of analogy of someone else who's out there trying to pick and choose which hot, asset class to invest into, or get out of this one and get in at this time. You've picked the worst time to invest. You haven't tried to select anything special. You've just invested, spread out across the biggest companies around the world. You've just done that, and you've just tipped that money in every week or every fortnight or every year. That's where you've got to. I think the big thing here for people to bear in mind is that there's the two parts. The way that I think of it is that this is how simple it can be. This is how easy it can be to get ahead financially. And the second thing is how hard that actually is. So it's simple, but it's not easy, because as we touched on in when we talked about the global financial crisis, that lived experience of, it's easy when it's a spreadsheet and your 100,000, grows, and you put your 10,000 in and it gets to 700,000. It's a very different experience when you've invested your $100,000 that you've painstakingly saved, and then you've watched that drop over the next 18 months. It takes a fair bit of discipline and dedication and commitment to the plan to just keep tipping your $10,000 in every year. Not only to not panic and not sell, but to keep working your plan of going, I know that I need to keep accumulating these shares in these biggest and best companies. I've got 10,000 spare every year. I'm just going to keep whacking that in and not look at the balance. So it's simple, but it's not easy, is the way that I'd put it.
No, you're spot on, especially the first period of time there. So
you would be forgiven for going, what's the point of this? What was the point of saving all that money? I might as well go on and blown it.
Yeah, and people believe at that point in time in that embedded in that 18 months of the global financial crisis, people started to believe that things were going to zero.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So it's a understandable decision. It's a wrong decision, but it's an understandable decision when your $100,000 drops to $50,000 or $45,000 or $43,000. It's an understandable decision to say, well, it's heading to zero.
Yeah,
I'll cash out now, and I'll just cut my losses. Which is what so many people did at that point in time. Yeah. If you had stuck to that strategy, things certainly recovered. Not only did they recover, you picked the worst day to invest in the last 14 years, and essentially your rate of return has been on par with the longer term average of the rates and return of the best quality companies in Australia and the world. So at around that 10% mark. So I think if you ask people and you said, okay, what if you invested the day before
where would you be now?
Global financial crisis, where would you be now? What would you have averaged as a rate of return? I think people might say, oh, you might be just getting back to where you come from, or you're breaking even, or your rate of return has been 1% or it's been 0% over that period of time.
Yeah.
It hasn't been. It's remarkable at how if you stay focused and stay the course, then
and it sort of ties on to something that we, a phrase that we often say when people ask us, is when's a good time to invest? And we basically say now. You invest when you have money that you don't need in the short term, and this is an example of why. It's because you're not saying invest that money now because we think the market's going up in the next 18 months. But the point is that over a long enough time frame, that purchase price becomes essentially irrelevant. And if you were sitting there and, if we had clients here 14 years ago saying, right, I want to retire in 14 years' time, I've got this $100,000 cash, when should I invest? Our answer would have been now, and we would have had egg on our faces for the first 18 months, and they would have been thinking, what am I paying these guys for? But as it turns out, that thesis would have been proven right over that 14 years. And as long as that person stayed the course and stuck to it and kept doing what their plan was, they would be in a pretty good situation now. And so that's why, we always use these examples of number one, you can't time the market. You can't know when to get in and get out. And secondly, it actually doesn't matter as much as you think it does. We did that previous podcast about all the different roles and returns of time. Over a long enough time frame, it all comes back to around a similar amount. And so if you are, we talk about if you're 10 years from retirement, but if you're 10 years from retirement, your time frame is not 10 years, it's actually 40 years. It's your 10 years of working life and your 30 years of retirement. So this is over 14 years. This is the big fear that we've touched on, that people go, well, I've invested and then another GFC's hit. Yep, over 14 years, it's essentially irrelevant. Over a 40-year time frame, it'd be even more irrelevant. So I think the concept of thinking this as just simple things that you have to do, it's simple, but it's not easy. It's just a matter of coming up with a plan, sticking to the plan and working it. And even if Murphy's Law strikes, you will still end up in a good position.
Yeah, the key is to stick to the plan. Remember why you put the plan in place.
Yeah.
Have a plan.
Yeah.
Remember why it's in place and stick to it. If you can do that, then almost always things work out the way that they should.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.